Hello, all. I realized that in trying to do a brief review of David Lynch's Twin Peaks: The Return, I've set myself a nearly impossible task. So I've decided to do it a little bit differently. I'm obviously not going to review each and every single episode because there are 18 of them, and there's just some wild, crazy stuff in there. Uh, some of which relates back to the original series and/or Fire Walk with Me, and some of which does not at all, and is completely new and interesting and convoluted and weird. As I've said in my previous reviews of David Lynch's work, I think the best way to view Lynch's work is as art, and art is open to interpretation. And I think it's right that Lynch doesn't come in and say, "No, you're wrong. That's not what this meant. This is what it meant." Um, but what I'm going to do is just a brief encapsulation. I'm not going to give too much stuff away. There's not going to be too many spoilers. Though, if you haven't seen it, I mean, it came out in 2017, so what's holding you up? Um, when I first saw it, I was kind of shocked and stunned, and I didn't know what the heck was going on. It was like waking up in the middle of a nightmare. And maybe that's really what it is. Again, Lynch likes to do this thing, a dream within a dream. And Agent Jeffries said that, played by David Bowie, said that in Fire Walk with Me. We are a dream within a dream, and we are as the dreamers. He said that several times. Uh, so again, without trying to dive too much into what Lynch means by that, again, it's open to interpretation. Dreams are not something that means the same thing to everybody. It could mean one thing to one person, one thing to another, and that's fine because that's the nature of dreams. Um, just briefly, there are basically three or four subplots running through the entirety of Twin Peaks: The Return. One is that the quote unquote good Dale Cooper is still trapped in the Black Lodge with, assumingly, the spirit of Laura Palmer. And he cannot escape because his doppelganger, who is referred to as Evil Coop, is now free in the world and is doing his own thing, making drug deals and hiring assassins, doing all these kind of terrible things. Um, there's a murder, and now it's going to be investigated by not Dale Cooper because he's disappeared at the end of Twin Peaks Season 2, but by Gordon Cole, played by David Lynch, and his new assistant, Tammy Preston, played by Krista Bell, who's a singer and actress, and Albert Hosteen, again played by Jose Ferrer shortly before he passed away, are investigating what appears to be another quote-unquote Blue Rose case. A librarian is discovered in, I think it's South Dakota, without a head, and so they got to figure out what's going on with that. Then there are a couple of other odd subplots. There's a subplot with Benjamin Horne has this really horrible nephew, Richard, who goes around, he does all these terrible things dealing with drugs. He runs a kid over and kills him and doesn't even stop. He basically mugs his grandmother for money because he needs money for drugs. He's working for Evil Coop at one point. And ultimately, in an odd sort of way, he's sacrificed to this sort of weird electrical forces. This whole thing about electricity that runs through the entirety of Twin Peaks, and it may have something to do primarily with episode 8. In episode 8, we find out that in approximately 1956, during an atomic bomb test at the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, a rift was opened between our world and another one. And several entities came through this rift. The evil entity known as Bob, another strange evil entity known as Jowdet or Judy, which is shown as sort of a frog-like, lizard-like creature. These evil beings called the Woodsmen, who are apparently their henchmen, but several good beings too, including the giant who is now referred to as the Fireman, and I think that's an interesting phrase. And I'll tell you why in a minute. And Laura Palmer comes through as an opposing force to these evil creatures. So it's not only evil that leaked into the world, good leaked into the world too through this atomic explosion. Then the events that pursue that event are followed up throughout the course of the series. And there's always this question that the one-armed man, I can't remember, I think his name is Phil, keeps asking. Rick, I'm sorry, his name is Rick. Is it future or is it past? And the backwards talking man was known as the Arm, asked that in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me of Agent Cooper. Is it future? Is it past? I think that's kind of an interesting way of Lynch talking about the nature of time. Is time cyclical or is it not cyclical? Is it completely random? Do we think something is happening now, but it actually happened in the past, or do we think something has happened, but it hasn't happened yet? It's going to happen in the future. That's kind of an interesting context, and I think that it ties in with something known as block universe theory, which states basically that time is simultaneous. Past, future, and present all exist at once. It's our perspective that differs and nothing else. And I actually kind of agree with that based on some rather odd personal experiences, which I'm not going to talk about here because I've talked about them previously. But um, they play into this. And again, I'm going to kind of reduce this to the whole weirdness of what goes on with Twin Peaks: The Return. The thing about Dougie being a sort of an alternate, sort of naive version of Dale Cooper. And then there's another version of Dale Cooper who's the old Dale Cooper who awakens after Dougie kind of dies or disappears, and then had apparently been housed within Dougie. And then there's Evil Cooper, who is ultimately killed, ironically enough, by Lucy, who shoots him. The person you'd least think would ever harm anybody ends up destroying the Evil Cooper, which I thought was a great, almost a joke on Lynch's part, but I thought it played out very well. I'm going to go into three poems, which I think are interesting. The first comes from Fire Walk with Me, and although it's never said entirely in the movie, it is said in Twin Peaks at one point. The poem Fire Walk with Me says, quote, and I'll quote, "Through the darkness of future past, the magician longs to see one chance out between two worlds. Fire walk with me." What does that mean? What does fire walk with me mean? Fire may or may not be a reference to electricity. In Fire Walk with Me, the backwards talking dwarf says electricity at one point. Apparently, these creatures, these beings from the other world, some of whom are evil and some of whom are good, use electricity as a conduit, as a way to travel between this world and the other one, and could do it at will as long as there's an electrical circuit somewhere nearby. And that also relates to the electrical pole that has the number 6 on it. Whether that's a reference to 666 and Satan, I don't know, because we only see it twice. So it's 66, not 666, but that's, I think, kind of an interesting thing, too. Second poem is the one that's read by the fireman over the radio, and it causes people to faint, causes people to pass out when they hear it. And that's, "This is the water, and this is the well. Drink deep and descend. The horse is the white of the eyes and dark within." What the heck does that mean? Why do people pass out when they hear it? Remember that there was a white horse in Fire Walk with Me when Sarah Palmer says, "Oh no, it's happening again." And she sees a white horse. What's the white horse? It's my interpretation. Again, it's only mine, it's subjective, that the white horse is a representation of this quote-unquote extreme negative force known as either Jowdet or Judy. And that's referenced to by the recurring character of Phil Jeffries, who has now turned into a teapot. I don't know what Lynch was trying to say with that. I just think it's really funny and interesting. It's not anything we've seen before, so that, again, is an original thing. The third thing, it's not a poem, it's a song by Julie Cruz, again at the Roadhouse. Two things. One, when she's singing it, everything else around her is red. She is lit up by a blue spotlight. And the name of the song is Questions in a World of Blue. And it's talking about, the lyrics are, and I'm not going to try to sing it, I'll spare you that, but why did you go? Why did you turn away from me? Why? Why did you go? Was it me? Was it you? Questions in a world of blue. How can a heart that's filled with love start to cry when all the world seems so right? How can love die? Was it me? Was it you? Questions in a world of blue. When did the day with all its light turn into night when all the world seemed so right? And again, was it me? Was it you? Questions in a world of blue. Questions in a world of blue. Okay, what does that mean? Other than being a good science, Julie Cruz has a gorgeous voice, and I just love hearing her sing. The way she sings it is so soulful, it almost makes you cry. I think that's kind of a reference to the ongoing, if it is really one, a love story between Dale Cooper and Laura Palmer. They have questions. They don't know what's happened. Why were they drawn together? Why were they torn apart? What's going on? What's going to happen? That's partially resolved in the end, where there's kind of a weird subplot after they get through all the stuff with Dougie and what's going on in Las Vegas, and the funny characters played by Jim Belushi and somebody else, that they're the McMillan brothers, who are these kind of gangsters. After all that plays out, there are two kind of serious episodes that are the last one, 17 and 18. In 17, we finally meet Diane. The person who Cooper was talking to on his tape recorder the whole time is his secretary, which makes sense. And that character is played by Laura Dern. And he and Diane are lured by the firemen. And I said that was interesting. The firemen are people who put out fires. What's fire in this thing? Fire is electricity. Electricity is the way that the evil entities travel. So a fireman could stop them, can put out the electricity. That's why the giant is never harmed by either Bob or Judy. The fireman tells him, remember Richard and Linda and the number 430. They travel exactly 430 miles south of their destination. Richard, the kind of evil schmuck character, is electrocuted by some strange force that bad Agent Cooper lures him to, so he doesn't get zapped back to he wants to avoid going back to the Black Lodge. That's why he created Dougie, to kind of take his place. But I digress. What happened in the last two episodes? 17, like I said, Diane and Dale Cooper, the good Dale Cooper, drive out to a hotel in the middle of a desert, exactly 430 miles north of this town they're in. And they go through some sort of electrical barrier. When they go through the barrier, they're not Agent Cooper and Diane anymore. They're these mythical romantic characters, Richard and Linda. They make love in the hotel, although they don't really seem to be enjoying it. Cooper wakes up the next morning. His car is different, and she's gone and just left him a note. And the note refers him to go back to the Great Northern Hotel where he had stayed. And so he gets in touch with Benjamin Horne and says, do you have my old room still ready? And he says, yeah, why don't you come here? And then in the 18th episode, the final one, he meets up with, he travels into this town to a place called Judy's Diner, and that's a overt clue there. Walks in, these kind of creepy guys are giving a waitress a hard time, and he deals with them in a very violent, non-Dale Cooper sort of manner. He threatens them, and I think he takes a shot at one of them and puts another one's hand in the French fry oil, something horrible like that, and chases them off. And he then asks the remaining waitress there, "Have you seen? Is there another waitress who works here?" And she says, "Yeah, but she's not on today. She called in sick." And he says, "What's her name?" She says, "Her name is Carrie Page," and gives him her address. He goes there and meets a woman who looks like Laura Palmer, but she's not. She's a totally different person. She has apparently killed her husband, shooting him through the head with a shotgun. He's just sitting in a chair, dead. And that's something of a difference between Carrie Page and Laura. Is Carrie destroyed her torturer, her tormentor, her husband, where Laura was not able to destroy Bob. But Dale Cooper tells her, "I think you're really a girl named Laura Palmer, and I'd like to take you back to this place called Twin Peaks." And she resists at first, but eventually says, okay, whatever. And they go. A number of other, odd things occur. And they get to Twin Peaks finally on the night that Laura was murdered. And that ties directly in with Fire Walk with Me, and the scene where Laura jumps off the motorcycle that she was on with James, and she's dressed in this kind of sexy lingerie, and runs into the forest. And now, instead of what happened in the original Twin Peaks, Cooper catches up with her and stops her. She screams and disappears. So that leaves us with the question, what the heck is going on? The evil Cooper shows up at the Twin Peaks Sheriff Station and is trying to find out where the real Cooper is, and is questioning Bobby Briggs, who's now a deputy sheriff, and Hawk and Andy, and Lucy is there and sees this. And there's also this guy, I can't remember what his name was, but he's got this like powerful metal arm, and he had seen a vision of himself destroying Bob, and that's what happens. Bob comes out in this sort of a silver orb, and this guy just punches it really hard, and it smashes to bits. So, effectively, he has destroyed Bob. Bob is gone. Or is he? We're not sure, because there's another scene with Agent Jeffries as the teapot where you see a sort of an infinity loop, and inside the loop is this silver ball, which I think was Bob. So maybe Bob is just now trapped. He can't get between either of the two worlds now. Now he's that's his damnation, as it were. He's stuck. Um, like I said, there's a confrontation with the evil Cooper, and of all people, he's starting to strangle, I think, Sheriff Truman, and Lucy comes into the room with a gun and shoots him. So now evil Cooper is destroyed. We go back to, of course, the Black Lodge, and the arm, which is now a tree with a brain on top of it, speaks briefly to Agent Cooper, tells him basically that he's going to create a new Dougie to go back and live with his wife and son as Janie E. and Sonny Jim, and so they can have a happy life, and that happens. And then he tells him that he'll be here with, Laura Palmer. And the last thing you see is, again, it's kind of like at the beginning where she's whispering something into his ear, and then she makes that gesture where she holds her hands out like this. What does this mean? It's sort of like a stop sign. Everything ends now, or everything's back to where it was. So the future and the past have now remeshed. But they go back to the real Dale Cooper and Carrie Page go to Laura Palmer's house and meet the new resident. And they ask him, did somebody named Leland and Sarah Palmer live here? And she says, no, nobody by that name lived here. I bought this house from the previous owner, Mrs. Cathcart. Well, Mrs. Cathcart was the evil kind of woman who gives Laura the strange painting of the door in Fire Walk with Me. And interestingly enough, she's the actress who on Seinfeld plays the lady who he steals the marble rye from, Mrs. Choate, who later shows up in an episode where his dad is kicked off the condo board because she recognizes Jerry as the guy who mugged her and stole her marble rye. A very good actress. I thought that was a very well done role, because she comes off as really creepy in Twin Peaks. Now, Cooper is very confused. He hears Laura scream. She seemingly disappears again. He walks out into the street, asks Carrie Page, what year is it? So again, there's that. Is it future? Is it past? He doesn't know what year it is anymore. And in the final scene, like I said, they're in the Black Lodge, and she is her young, beautiful self again, and whispers in his ear, and makes the gesture. What does that mean? Some people say they think means they failed. I think exactly the opposite. I think that the scream we heard, the scream of Sarah Palmer screaming Laura, is not her. It's Judy, it's Zhao Day, who has now been forced out of existence by the fact that Cooper altered the timeline by saving Laura Palmer's life. This is confirmed by the fact that her body in the plastic bag disappears from the beach. She's no longer dead. She hasn't been murdered. And in fact, she appears never to have lived in Twin Peaks, so she can't have been murdered. Now she and Dale Cooper are in the Black Lodge forever in love, and it's sort of, in an odd way, their own version of heaven. That's my interpretation. Again, you're free to interpret it completely differently if you want to. There's lots of stuff I left out, all kinds of interesting details about this hermaphroditic character called the Experiment, and this blind woman called Nomi, who turns out to be the real Diane, hidden as a quote-unquote tulpa. A tulpa is a person manufactured from somebody who is like a blank slate version of them. And lots of other odd stuff going on here. Some of it's funny, some of it's creepy, some of it's just downright completely weird. You look at yourself like, what the heck did I just watch? And I think that's the point. I think that's what Lynch wants you to do, to ask yourself, what the heck did I just watch? With the whole thing, the entirety of Twin Peaks. He had hinted that there's maybe more. I hope there is, actually. I hope there is some more Twin Peaks for us, just because I enjoy it and love it so much, that it's so weird, so out there, so unlike anything else, that I think the only way to interpret it is, like I said, as art. You can look at it and say, I see this, and somebody else can look at it and say, I see that, and that's fine. That's the whole point. Anyway, I hope you enjoy.